Well, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this third webinar in our third series of Encore webinars. These webinars are sponsored by the Schlegel UW Research Institute for Aging and Conrad Grebel University College in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, and the Centre for Aging and Pastoral Studies in Australia. My name is Jane Kipfer, and I'm in Waterloo, and my co-host is Sally Mordyke in Australia. Feel free to pop greetings and your location into the chat if you like at any time. These webinars have their origins in the 10th International Conference on Aging and Spirituality that was held in June 2023 here in Waterloo. They're providing us as people interested in spirituality and aging with opportunity to keep learning and to stay connected around the world in this time between conferences. We're glad that you could join us today. And yes, we are recording, and you'll be sent a link to access the video and the chat and the PowerPoint slides. Today we'll be hearing from Susan McFadden in Wisconsin and Bishop Lawson Bryan in Alabama. We're grateful to Bishop Bryan for taking Daphne Johnston's place as she suddenly needed to prioritize her caregiving role in her own family. So our prayers are with her and with her dad, who's in hospital at the moment. Today, we are here to talk about creating joy through spiritual relationships and volunteer service, how faith communities can support dementia care through memory cafes, long-term care outreach, and community respite programs. First, to introduce our speakers. Susan McFadden, PhD, is Professor Emerita of Psychology, University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. She volunteers in many capacities for Fox Valley Memory Project, a nonprofit that she co-founded in 2012 that has created a dementia-friendly community in Northeast Wisconsin. She participates in memory cafes, the Fox Valley Memory Project Chorus, the Spark Alliance of Arts and Cultural Institutions, and the annual Memory Camp in the North Woods of Wisconsin. She experiences joy and spiritual connection in all of these programs, serving people living with dementia, their care partners, and their friends. Now, Daphne Johnston, who was originally planning to be with us, she's the executive director and co-founder of the Respite for All Foundation, which is a nonprofit based in Montgomery, Alabama, dedicated to building sustainable, volunteer-based communities that support individuals living with dementia and their care partners. So the inspiration for Respite for All began in 2012 when Lawson Bryan, who is with us today, was senior minister of First United Methodist Church of Montgomery, Alabama, and Daphne was part of the congregation. So as the church was asking what needs to happen in this community that will not happen unless a church does it, they started thinking about something for people living with dementia and their families, but they didn't know what until Daphne saw the vision. And Daphne and Lawson started working together, beginning with a community forum on dementia and then a year of research and imagining a model, and that was 12 years ago. You'll hear from Lawson today about what Respite for All has become and is becoming across denominations and from coast to coast. Lawson's also recently done some research on how volunteers grow in their own faith through respite, which is very interesting. So back in 2023, at our international conference, Daphne presented a workshop about Respite for All, and Susan was one of our keynote speakers. Susan's also been part of the planning team for several of these international conferences over the years. So we are so fortunate to have you here today, both Susan and Lawson, to talk together about projects that you've poured your hearts and your energy into over the years. Before you get started, I just want to remind everyone to please keep your microphone muted while you're listening. Sally will keep an eye on the chat for questions and comments. And we're not going to hold ourselves strictly to the 1 hour mark for our webinar today, as we expect there might be questions and conversation that will stretch our time. So feel free to come and go as you need to, and be assured we'll catch it all on video if there's anything you want to catch up on later. And we'll make sure that we take time to have questions and conversation at the end. So Susan and Lawson, I'm going to turn the floor over to you now.
Okay, thank you so much. going to share my slides here. There we go. So you can see the, whoops, hold on a sec. Go back to that. You can see the title of our talk today. Daphne and I worked this out, and Lawson has graciously agreed to step in for Daphne. You will see photos of Daphne a little bit later, and you'll also see her in a video that we're going to show you. And you will immediately recognize her energy and her commitment to this project. So we're going to get started here by thinking back to the first two Encore webinars. So the first one that we had this season back in December was Dr. Alan Power. And he played his guitar and sang for us and talked about music and the importance in his life. He is a physician. He's worked with people with dementia for a very long time. And he knows about the importance of the arts for individuals living with dementia, their care partners, and their friends, and also the volunteers. Now, we will be thinking a lot about the arts as we go through this presentation today. So keep in mind how Al Power started us off. Whoops, I don't know why it's skipping ahead like that. There's our dear friend Elizabeth McKinley in Australia. She did the second Encore webinar in this past January. She's been my friend for a long time and is a wonderful person about thinking through the challenges to find meaning and purpose in later life. And you can see that in the title of the program that she presented to us. I'll be talking more about Liz's work in another minute or so. So we have this title, The Power of Presence, Creating Joy Through Spiritual Relationships and Volunteer Services. We're going to give you today 3 models for faith communities to engage in dementia care. So I'm going to talk about memory cafes and then turn it over to Lawson, who will talk about the Respite for All program. And I'm going to finish up with a few comments about how people in faith communities can serve folks living in various types of memory care communities. But over all of this is going to be this theme of volunteering and the importance of volunteering for the individuals with dementia and their care partners and for those volunteers. And I'm going to talk about what I call spiritual companionship. But we're going to begin with this word joy because that is not a word that is usually associated with dementia. This is a highly stigmatized condition. It is the most feared condition for people ages 55 and older, and the second most feared condition after cancer for people, adults of all ages. So how on earth can I talk about joy here? Well, we can talk about something that we can think of as paradoxical joy, or some people call it subversive joy. That is, that in the midst of this stigmatized condition that nobody wants and that many people are afraid of, there can nevertheless be joy. And you are going to see multiple examples of that in our presentation today. I'm particularly interested in this idea of subversive joy. It comes from theological thinking in many religions, but has been really put forward by an African American theologian named Willie James Jennings. And I put the URL here for you to read more about Dr. Jennings and his thinking about how the African American people from the very beginnings in our country, in slavery, could nevertheless experience joy despite the conditions of their lives. And it's a deeply theological term. So you'll be hearing a lot about joy as we move on today. So what do I mean by spiritual companionship? Over here on the right is Liz McKinley's model of spirituality. And if you were with us last month, or if you saw the recording of her presentation, you know that she situates joy in the middle of a number of different experiences in our lives. She says that it is ultimate meaning mediated through our relationships with one another, through the arts, through creation and the environment, and also through religion. And by that we mean religious traditions, uh, sacred texts, liturgies, people gathering together, etc. So, how does that apply here? Well, we are thinking of spiritual companionship as a relationship. And today we're talking about volunteers in relationship with people living with dementia. And when I say people living with dementia, I mean both the person with that condition and the care partner and their friends and paid caregivers too. So, spiritual companionship is a relationship. It can be promoted and prompted and nurtured by religious faith, but it doesn't have to be. It can occur in religious settings like Respite for All does, and some memory cafes, which you'll hear about in a minute, but doesn't have to be. Um, and it can be nurtured by shared enjoyment of the arts and shared enjoyment of the natural world. Now, I don't have very many pictures of our folks here in northeast Wisconsin enjoying the natural world right now because it's very cold and snowy. But I do have a couple of summer pictures for you. These are taken at one of our memory cafes about 20 minutes from where I live, Neenah, Wisconsin. It's on a river that empties into a large lake. And every year, the memory cafe that meets at the library in Neenah gets permission from the Department of Natural Services to allow people to fish without fishing licenses. And they team up with the fishing club at the local high school, and our Memory Cafe participants get to fish outdoors with young people. And it's a wonderful experience that they look forward to every year. So that's my picture of enjoyment in the natural world. Now, what do these spiritual companions do? Well, first of all, it's important to note that they do receive some training about dementia and the lives of care partners. Now, I don't mean that they get into the weeds about brain changes and all the many different types of dementia, although they may learn about that, they may be interested in that. But in general, to learn about communication tactics with folks living with dementia, about the sensory changes that may take place in some people that need to be accommodated, and they need to learn about the lives of care partners in the context of this condition that is progressive. So, how you see a person now may not be how you see that person in another year. Well, you still see their humanity and their personhood, but their behavior may have changed, their language may have changed, and the person caring for them has also experienced those changes. So our volunteers need some training in that. And as much as possible in all of these volunteer opportunities we're going to talk to you about today, people should commit to a regular connection with people living with dementia. This is not a one-off. This is to say you come once a month or twice a month or once a week, but you should have some kind of regular interaction so you really get to know people. And you get to know them through these arts activities, these experiences in the natural world, and sometimes through specifically religious activities like leading worship, a prayer group, a Bible study, etc. Now, let's state the obvious. The most well-documented risk factor for Alzheimer's and other dementias is age, and as well as age, another important risk factor for dementia is social isolation. We've certainly learned a lot about that through research since the pandemic. We were thinking about it before the pandemic, but now we're thinking a lot about it. So we want to have a change happen in our communities. We want to go from these isolated islands of people living, maybe, losing friends, becoming more isolated from their communities. We want to go from that to building bridges in our communities, to finding ways to connect with people living with dementia. And that's what we're trying to do with the three kinds of areas that you're going to hear about today. I'm going to start by talking about memory cafes. Some of you are familiar with memory cafes. I have been part of the Memory Cafe Alliance. You can see the logo over here on the right and the URL down below it. This is an organization that is coordinating memory cafes around the country. Unfortunately, we're just in the US right now, but there are memory cafes in many other countries, in particular in the UK. We'd like to spread memory cafes throughout the US and the wider world. They give people an opportunity to enjoy being together in a safe, welcoming, stigma-free environment. We have lots of interesting activities. We talk to one another. We always have some kind of a treat. And we like to say that you leave your diagnosis at the door. That is, that you come into the Memory Cafe, whether you're meeting in a library or an actual cafe, perhaps you're in a nature center or some other public space, and you don't have to worry about the fact that you can't remember things, that you're a little bit confused, maybe you can't speak very well anymore, and your care partner doesn't have to worry about that either. Here's a video to demonstrate this.
Memory cafes are welcoming social gatherings for people with cognitive changes or dementia, along with caring family members, friends, and professional caregivers.
It's a social hour which we all need.
We feel very normal.
At a memory cafe, you'll experience joy, community, and a chance to learn new things.
I learned that we're all human in a memory cafe.
I learned joy at Memory Cafe.
I learned about the power of community at a memory cafe.
You may find guest artists, musicians, and dancers, or educational programs at a memory cafe. But above all, you'll find a place to connect with others who understand what you're going through because they're experiencing something similar. These gatherings are free. Be a part of a growing community of memory cafes nationwide and join us.
You should join us next time.
You should join us next time.
Please come and join me next time.
Come and join us.
Learn more at memorycafedirectory.com. You can find a cafe near you or learn how to start one in your community.
Thanks for participating.
Okay, whoops. So, who attends our memory cafes? Well, as I said, people having memory loss or other symptoms of dementia, but you don't need an official diagnosis. And as a matter of fact, we know that up to 50% of people experiencing symptoms of dementia never get an official diagnosis. But we are explicit about the fact that the Memory Cafe is serving people living with dementia. We want folks in the community to know that that's what's happening in this room at the library or in the cafe or the nature center. We have care partners there. Sometimes we have paid caregivers. We always have visitors who want to learn about memory cafes. And importantly, we have volunteers. The Memory Cafe Alliance operates a directory in the U.S. which shows you where memory cafes are located around the country. There are about 600 memory cafes that are identified on the Memory Cafe directory. And we also offer free trainings. So any of you on this program today, even if you don't live in the U.S., you could access our free trainings. One of them tells you how to start and sustain a memory cafe. Another one tells you about what the cafe leader needs to know about dementia and people who are caring for folks with dementia. And then lots of good ideas for creative programming with people living with dementia at memory cafes. And the final thing I want to say about memory cafes is that they can occur in faith communities. And I have two examples here. Up in the upper right hand is a memory cafe. It's called Day by Day Memory Cafe. It's at One United Church of Christ Church in Monroe, Wisconsin, kind of a small town in Monroe, Wisconsin, that has this slogan of the United Church of Christ: no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. And that really is a beautiful, inclusive statement for people living with dementia and care partners. And down below here, I have an illustration of Alter, which is a wonderful organization, which is also national, that is bringing Black churches together to support people living with dementia. And it's very important because they are educating people about dementia in their churches. They are starting memory cafes, and they're really an important component in the public health outreach that we need to perhaps, hopefully, make people feel more welcomed in their community if they're experiencing these symptoms. Now I'm going to turn it over to Lawson and let him tell you about Respite for All.
Okay, well, hello everybody, whether it's good morning, afternoon, or evening for you. I'm grateful to get to be here with you, and I want to do what has been done earlier. I want to mention Daphne Johnston, and certainly Daphne sends her greetings. She truly would like to be here. She would love nothing better than to be here, but she is right where she needs to be, caring for her father in the hospital, and we hope that that will go well soon. And Daphne is very special to me because it was 12 years ago, as we were wrestling in the church with what to offer for people living with dementia and their families. Daphne called me one day and said, "Lawson, I see the vision." And her background in gerontology and running senior centers, and her passion, even going back to her mother's early vocation, equipped Daphne to see that vision. And so you see before you here on this slide what we'll be doing in a few weeks will be another of our annual meetings. We meet once a year with our directors and volunteers and people who are thinking about launching a respite ministry. So this slide shows one of those national gatherings, and we bring in people who will add value to our directors and volunteers by sharing skills and techniques and processes that can be incorporated into everybody's respite. Let's go to the next slide, and this is answers the question, what is respite? And it is a period of rest and renewal and refreshment, and it's for all of those that you see listed here. It is for the person living with dementia, but it's also, we've learned it's for the care partner, but we've also learned that it's for the volunteers. The volunteers report a level of refreshment and renewal that comes from their involvement. And so with the respite ministry, we have an opportunity for all three of these groups to benefit and to grow together. Let's look at the next slide. You may see, and this is our reminder of our documentary that is, by the way, available on the website, and that is respiteforall.org. And if you go to respiteforall.org, this will be the first item on the website. It's a 40-minute documentary that traces one couple, Madeline and Bill White, in Birmingham, Alabama, from the time he was diagnosed with dementia through the weeks and months when they said, "We'll just handle this ourselves," and then got to the end of their rope and found respite and found a place of belonging that continues to be their place today. So that's why it's entitled A Place of Belonging. There you see Daphne Johnston already representing all the energy that she brings to everything she does. So we previewed this. The documentary was released about a year ago. So this gives you an idea at Respite. Some are 1 day a week, 2 days, 3 days. We are 4 days a week at our Respite in Montgomery, Alabama, which is the original one. We now have over 65 around the country in 20 states, among 11 denominations, and some also in community centers. So the arrival which is itself is worth seeing because we have our volunteers out in the parking lot. So care partners drive up, and the person living with dementia is ready to be at Respite because they know it's going to be a beautiful experience. And so our volunteers, whom they've gotten to know, open the door and take them out of the car and walk them in. Then we have arrival time, coffee, and some socialization activities. That's followed by brain fitness. All the activities we do in Respite throughout the day are aimed at some neural connections, and the brain fitness would involve group discussions, trivia, where answers are put on the whiteboard to questions that are asked, and it's really lively and stimulating in a very healthy way. Then we come to physical fitness, and we have about an hour, and this might involve something like what looks like a volleyball net, and the volunteers and those living with dementia will have one of these long noodles in their hand that you use at a swimming pool, and we hit balloons over the net. Tremendous amount of physical activity goes on there. You can do it. Most people do it sitting. Most of our activities can be sitting or standing, depending on what's best for the individual. Then from 11:15 to noon, we have music, art, and one of the interesting things that Daphne recently added a year or two ago to this was our colleagues at the University of Miami in Ohio have a program called OMA, Opening Minds Through Art. And students work with people living with dementia, and they work together in abstract art. So Daphne arranged and paid for us to be able to offer OMA training to all of our directors of all of our respite ministries so that the art itself is informed by the research in Miami, and all the activities are of that quality and caliber. From noon to 12:45, we have a hot lunch with dessert every day. It's prepared there at First United Methodist Church. And we eat around tables in small groups, and people have a chance to connect with each other over lunch, which is something I enjoy being there to get to do. After lunch, it's time for balloon volleyball, which is what I was actually describing earlier. The physical fitness earlier usually involved that I mentioned, I failed to tell you in the morning. We have people from who are physical therapists, and we also have people who are personal trainers who volunteer to come and lead us in the physical fitness, stretching type exercises. Then volleyball fits really well after lunch, and everybody gets very involved in it, and rather competitive too. Then from 1:15 to 2, activity and music. We actually have a 65 voice choir of people living with dementia and their families who do concerts together. And so we'll have a choir rehearsal. We'll have a variety of kinds of music that we do. Sometimes outside musical groups will come in, young people from some of the schools, and play their musical instruments. And about once a month, we'll have a worship service. And everybody that wants to come to that, nobody is forced to do it, but anybody that wants to do that can do that. And that's where we see how much is still in people that they have learned in worship. And when we give it a chance to show itself, they'll participate fully in worship. That's the flow of the day. And as I said, here in Montgomery, we do that 4 days a week. And there are some people who come every day, and there are some who might come 3 days or 2 days. Of course, the more somebody participates, the greater the benefits. So let's look at the next slide here now. Yes, and so you can see that we're not limited in the people that we serve. This is a list across the top here that shows those, and I'm even reminded of the natural aging of persons who come because they need to get out of their apartment or their house and be present here. But all of those you see listed there are part of our experience at Respite. Friends must be able to be mobile, but assisted devices, we have walkers and wheelchairs, handle their own bathroom needs, eat on their own, although they are accompanied, if needed, always by somebody close by, not invading their privacy, but we always want to be around if a sudden need emerges, and be comfortable in a group setting. And you see the rosemary memory icon over there on the right-hand column. Now, we've stressed that the respite is not medical, it's a social. And you see a list here of the kinds of things that we specialize in and that our volunteers are trained to lead. And imagine all of those going on day after day. But the last one is especially meaningful to me because often people living with dementia do not make new friends. And so the fact that we can have new relationships grow out of respite is a great blessing. So let's look at the next slide here. It's not medical. We don't do meds. It's social, and that seems to be that is exactly what people need. No labels. We know that everybody's dealing with something, so you'll notice the name tags hanging here all look the same. There's no distinction between the volunteer or the person living with dementia. They all look the same and all interact and all are a blessing to each other in a great many ways. So let's look at the next one. So a key component, as I just said, is no difference between a volunteer and a participant. And in fact, we have people with various degrees of dementia and volunteers who are struggling with their own kinds of issues. And when they are together, they are really ministering to each other. We have a lawyer, he's not practicing law anymore with dementia, but he was coaching a 35-year-old man who is a Downs person, and he was helping him get acclimated to the group. None of the rest of us were doing anything. The man with dementia was taking charge of that young man. So it was beautiful. Next, okay, so we do have volunteer training, and it's similar to what Susan was talking about earlier about in Memory Cafe, the kind of training that you offer is very important about how to cultivate relationships, what respectful communication is like, how to not think other people have to get into our world, but how to be open to those with whom we are working. And the no-fail atmosphere includes not only those living with dementia, but with the volunteers. Daphne says to the volunteer, you don't have to sign up or tell me when you'll be here. I don't want you to run away from me in the grocery store because you can't come one day. Give us a general idea when you'll be here. And fortunately, we have enough volunteers that we have one-to-one, basically a one-to-one relationship every week. Training, very important. Let's look at the next slide here. One of the rich, meaningful parts of a respite is that the people involved get to do service projects. And so they might be doing diaper bags here for young families. One of the ones we do in Montgomery is Meals on Wheels for pets. During disasters, people sometimes don't have food for their pets. And so several times a year, we pack food for pets that the Meals on Wheels organization then can deliver. And we have a variety of service projects for the community that our respite ministries do all around the country. And this is an extremely important sense of purpose and meaning for those living with dementia and for our volunteers as well. All right, let's look at the next one here. This is the chapel where, and we don't always come to the chapel. Sometimes we might be in the meeting room where we normally have respite, but this is just an example of, also it reminds me to remind a lot of joy being one of our themes today. The overall theme of respite ministry is reclaiming joy together. And so the volunteers can reclaim joy, those living with dementia and their families are reclaiming joy together. And in our worship, we are wide open to, we acknowledge, honor, and celebrate faith backgrounds of all kinds. And that's very important to us. And it allows each person there, whatever their background may be, or no faith background at all, to be honored and respected and invited in to this time together. Let's look at the next one here. This is a map. At the end of this past year, we did have 65 communities around the country. The Since we started here in the South, you can see a lot there. Actually, you have 19 in Alabama. But you notice they're all over the Southeast and now up north and far west in Washington, Montana, Idaho, California, and beginning to move into the middle of the country as well. And remember, we actually have grant money that we can offer to help people launch a respite, and we are very interested in using some of that internationally in other countries who might like to explore respite, and we can help. We have a roadmap for how you explore it, and then we have some grant money to help launch one. Okay, let's see the next one here. It's very important that respite be sustainable. We're not starting these to have them fizzle out. And so what works in our favor is synagogues, churches, and communities often have, churches especially and synagogues, already have rooms. They have space, so we don't have to build any rooms or rent any space. It's part of the operation of that particular faith group. Minimal paid staff, mostly usually a part-time director. And it's a social program, no meds. Revenue comes from daily fees. Most of our people that come, our friends with dementia, are paying significant amounts of money for sitters in many cases, and our daily fee is much, actually less than that. It covers the cost of the lunch and of supplies, but we never turn anyone away. If someone simply cannot provide any revenue, then we scholarship them, and so we have persons who give money so nobody ever has to be turned away. It's covered by the insurance that we already have at church, and then we have community partners, other churches, civic organizations, synagogues who provide volunteers and funding, and who also have persons living with dementia in their group. And they are a part of all of this together. This is what makes it sustainable. Okay, let's see what else we have here. So here are a couple of quotes from people. This 10-year veteran points out that they find a sense of freedom and abandon in life. It liberates them to come and be a part of respite, which is one of the reasons we don't really have people that they tend to stay with us. We don't see burnout a lot because it's very life-giving, and they don't have to come. They only come as many days a week as they want to come. Might be one day a week. Let's look at the other observation here from my friend Harry Curlin. When he retired, he did begin studying theology, and he wanted to study more about Christ. But then he realized through respite that he was actually following Christ more faithfully by being a volunteer, and it was enriching his faith. And these are the kind of things that led me to do a survey of 12 of our long-term volunteers. And I'm grateful to the Methodist Church, United Methodist Church, Discipleship Ministries for publishing this in a booklet that shows how people told us they were growing in their faith. And I enjoy getting to share that with faith communities and with clergy especially, and the volunteers, so they know what they're in for, how they will grow spiritually. Let's look at the next one here. I think we have the video now.
The real value in the respite ministries is this connection with all aspects of the person. It's not just the person affected by the dementia. It's not just the caregiver, but rather this sense that we are working together to improve our quality of lives.
Respite care is a part of our ministry that provides a support for families, not only here in the congregation, but in the community. For our church being predominantly African American, it's really a blessing just to have this ministry, have this center here to provide that for us. From a cultural standpoint, usually for people that are living with dementia or some chronic disease or something like that, we tend to hold them close at home. We don't bring them out. So that's been a great change for our community, is to utilize all of the services and resources outside of our homes and moving away from the stigma of keeping our loved ones away from being exposed in a way to a spiritual denomination that normally they wouldn't have.
That's what I love about Respite for All, is that We want to take a holistic approach in helping our families.
Respite for all signifies respite for the care partner, respite for the person living with dementia and disease, but it also signifies respite for the mediocrity of retirement. How many baby boomers do we know that are searching for purpose and meaning? We had no idea the power that this was going to have to transform their lives.
We dance, we sing, we have so much fun, and when they leave, I feel like I've done something with my life for that day, and I've enriched their life, but more than that, they've enriched mine, because I've had a great time, and I just feel very fulfilled, and it's different from any other volunteer experience that I've had, because it's so rewarding. It's instant gratification, you know.
It's the day of the week that I laugh the most, I get the most hugs, and I just enjoy it so much that I get more out of it, I think, than I give to them. But it's just, it's a family, and you just feel the love for these people, and they show the love to us.
What it did for our church, what it continues to do for Canterbury is just remarkable. Probably half of our volunteers don't belong to our church. So it really brings people in to be together in the community.
Just being in this place, being in this church, being in this atmosphere brings us closer together in a way that I think many times we don't realize how important it is. And that's the great thing, is that we're really making a great impact, not only in their lives, but especially in their families' lives, knowing that there is a support system in place, and a spiritual one too. I think we have to acknowledge God in the presence of this ministry, because without Him working in us to provide for them, it just couldn't be.
Our church members who are volunteers have come alive in a way I always longed that they would be, but I couldn't make it happen. And they would say to me things like, I feel more like I'm serving Christ now than I ever have. One said, I joined this church to get to do things like this. I just didn't know it would be this good. That's when I realized we've got something here that's not just like any other program, it's a ministry, and it's changing the lives of the volunteers who are part of it. Okay, thank you. I think that, thank you for the chance to share this.
Well, thank you, Lawson. And, you know, everything that your volunteers said and that you said about the volunteers are things that I have heard from our volunteers in memory cafes. We are at a memory cafe for a shorter period of time, but there's much that is similar, and it truly feeds the spirit of our volunteers. I want to turn this conversation in a different direction to talk about spiritual companionship in various forms of long-term care. You know, I've been in this working in this area for a very long time, and I can't tell you how many times I have heard it said from research that about 90% of people living with dementia still live in the community. I bet some of you on this call have heard that as well. The majority of people living with dementia live in the community, which is great, but that always makes me wonder, those folks who are living in various forms of long-term care, are they living on Mars? Where are they living? Aren't they a part of our community? So this next slide is kind of a metaphor that I have liked for a long time. This is a castle that was built in England a long, long time ago, surrounded by a moat. And I often have the feeling that our long-term care communities, whether it's a standalone memory care or it's assisted living or it's a continuum of care, it sometimes feels like they have moats around them, because people in the community don't go in there unless they work there or they have a loved one living there. And sad to say, some of those who have a loved one living there don't go there because they say, how many of you have ever heard this? I just want to remember him like he was, right? People say that. And that's so hard because that individual with dementia is still fully a person. And you just need to get to know them in their current state of having this problem with memory and cognitive function, etc. And so what we want to do is to eliminate the moats around long-term care. And we want to do that by bringing people into these various forms of long-term care. And I think that faith communities are well situated to do this, and that they can find and train volunteers to visit folks living with dementia. And we have to understand that this is going to be more advanced dementia in most cases, but we can train them to find joy in coming into these long-term care settings on a regular basis. And I'll tell you a couple examples. I have a good friend in my church whose mother is in a memory care community. She's quite advanced in her dementia, and she's actually on hospice right now. And my friend's husband has family in England, and they wanted to go visit the family in England over the holidays, but they were worried because there was nobody to visit the mother in long-term care. And so she got together a group of us from the congregation, and we got a schedule. Remember, we talked about getting it on your schedule, and we found people that would visit mom every single day, and we learned to appreciate that time with her. And I would go and we would sing a hymn together because she loved music, and we would talk about really deep theological things like gratitude. We are so grateful. And this woman, deeply into dementia, would give me the gift of talking about gratitude. So these one-on-one relationships and visitations to various forms of long-term care can be very gratifying. But there are other ways to do this as well. We can bring our youth into long-term care settings, as you can see up here on the left-hand side, doing art together. And we can educate them. I have always found that young people respond very positively to learning about dementia and learning about how they can find joy with people living with dementia. So, many faith communities have youth groups. Well, teach them how to find joy in their community with people living with dementia. Down here on the right-hand side is a young man who is playing the piano. You can bring people in to sing hymns and lead hymn sings. And many of you in this audience know that folks even deeply into dementia, perhaps without much language, when you start singing, they will sing with you, or they will tap their hands or tap their feet. And I have seen that many, many times. The picture in the middle here shows a young pastor in our community who comes to a memory care community and offers a service in the afternoon on Tuesdays. You can see that this memory care community does not have a fancy chapel. Many do, many of these continuum of care places do have fancy chapels, but this is not a fancy chapel. They just move some chairs around and people sit there and he talks to them and they appreciate it so much. So there's so many ways that faith communities can serve folks living in some type of memory care in their communities. So this last slide that I have for you is a list of books with practical information about how this can happen. Guides for worship, guides for volunteer service. If you look down the list, you can see that there's a book by Daphne Johnston there, Reclaiming Joy Together. It's a wonderful book that you can order from the Respite for All Foundation, and I highly recommend the other books as well. I have sent a list of these books with brief 3 to 4 line descriptions of the books to Jane, and Jane can send that full list to you, and maybe she already has. So we are so excited to share this information with you, to have you thinking with us about the joy, the paradoxical or the subversive joy of doing this volunteer service with people living with dementia. This very last slide shows that Daphne and I are very happy to talk with you about what we do. You can contact us through email, and we'd be glad to have Zoom conversations with you or send you resources, help you form memory cafes, or start a Respite for All program in your community. We're just excited to spread the word about this. So I'm going to stop sharing now and turn to Sally, who has probably been collecting some comments and questions in the chat, and see what you'd all like to talk about.
Susan, thank you. Lawson and Daphne, thank you so much for such a wonderful and hopeful and actually very moving presentation. I'm just feeling really hopeful, because there does feel like there is a sense that a diagnosis of dementia means that's it, no more joy. So you do remind us today, and thank you, that joy transcends all our situations that we experience in life. Thank you. So we've had just a couple of comments. Thank you for people who popped in some comments. Beth reminded us that animals, especially dogs, can bring so much joy to those living with dementia. And they're just, I know that our dog is just accepting of everybody. It doesn't matter what illness you may have. And Hermione made a beautiful comment that in the Hindu faith, theological belief is rooted in inherent joy. Mm-hmm. I think this gives us some hope there. I was very interested that you said that, over half people experiencing dementia symptoms don't actually have a formal diagnosis, and that the majority of people in dementia are living in the community. And I'm going to ask Lawson to jump in here too. What if, it sounds like from the videos that we had that Respite for All works very well, and that there are a lot of people who come in and volunteer. What about if you're just a small town and you have a very, very small pool of volunteers who are already overstretched? Can Respite for All or memory cafes still be run in small towns?
We have discovered that they can, and what we are able to do is tailor the experience of what the community can support and actually needs. So we need to be aware of getting to know the community and what the needs are. But it is true that volunteers, in some faith groups, the volunteers in a church may already be stressed. And so just adding something on top of that is not likely to be a very helpful thing. So what we do is work, and often for about a year, to help a group get ready to decide what is it we should launch, what type of iteration of this works for us. But we also have discovered, and this is what happened to us in Montgomery, that if we offer a community forum in a community of any size, would you like to come learn something about brain health and about dementia? We did that before we even hired Daphne to do the research that led to the model. And we were thinking 50 to 75 people would come, and 400 came. So that's when we heard the community say, we're willing to support this if you're willing to do it. So at that point, we had people write their name on a 3x5 card, and we said, if you're interested in this, if we do something, let us know. So I always encourage churches of any kind, any size, in the smallest community. Those may be the best, because those communities may not have a lot of these kinds or any kind of resources coming to them. And we can provide speakers, we can provide a community forum day. And then we often find that people in nursing school or caregivers will come to be part of that. It can be an annual event. And out of that, there may grow people who say, I would like to be a volunteer. And they're not members of that church. They just want to be a volunteer. So it's very organic, the way we like to work with communities.
Yeah. And yeah, I'd like to put in a word for memory cafes in small communities to say, I've been very much involved with libraries that sponsor memory cafes, and libraries around the country are really getting the word here that they can do memory cafes. But you know, there are libraries in very small towns, and they may have just one or two paid staff. And they may not feel that they have the capacity to do a monthly memory cafe. But what I've seen happen is that they can collaborate with other small libraries in other small towns in their region. And so maybe they offer one every 3 months, but then there's a memory cafe, 20 miles away in another library that offers a memory cafe a few times a month. And that's how you can do it. You can approach this creatively. And figure out how we can serve people. I mean, part of what the Memory Cafe Alliance is trying to do is to serve under-resourced communities. So sometimes that's communities of color. Up here in Northeast Wisconsin, we have a Memory Cafe in Spanish. We're working with the Hmong community. We're trying to really get out to these different communities and then the rural communities as well, and to find places in rural communities that can sponsor memory cafes. I gave you that example of Monroe, Wisconsin. It is not a big place, but they can have a memory cafe. So it is possible.
Wonderful. It is possible. And just hearing you talking, I'm actually today in a very, very little town. There's probably about 100 people, but the mobile library visits every Saturday. And I suddenly thought, well, when the mobile library visits, why don't you meet at the cafe and have a memory cafe? That could be a way through. Thank you. That is really, really good. And Lawson, I loved what you said about Respite for All can bring people who aren't part of a faith, but they actually experience some love themselves. And that's amazing. I do have one interesting question. Jess asks, I'm interested in how your organisations navigate changing capacity for consent among those you serve. We're hearing the language of mission and faith, and the work is rooted in Christian values. Can you speak about how your organisation approaches consent to religious or spiritually oriented care, particularly when the client's capacity may fluctuate or diminish or be difficult to assess?
Lawson,
big question.
You want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I can say that part of our training for volunteers is it was on the list too. Learning ways to connect with people and pay attention to them and understand whatever faith background there may be or none at all. So we don't begin with it's really based on the Hebrew idea that everybody's made in the image of God, and that we want to honor that, not trample on it. And so that means listening, paying attention. And we, at our last national conference, we got one evaluation from a fellow from New York who said, I'm a Jewish atheist, and this is the most spiritual experience I have ever been to. And so I think our understanding is that it's all encompassing in terms of our spirituality, but each person may bring differences in that, and that enriches the mix. That's part of what we want to honor. So our volunteers take delight not in imposing anything of themselves on others, but in helping others identify and celebrating what someone might be a faith commitment or faith involvement of that person. So I think that's part of what they find delightful.
So is there any consent forms that need to be filled in by people who come along, or is it just a turn up and just enjoy?
Well, when people come to Respite, they meet with our director and we invite them to come, be a part of it, see what it is, bring their loved one. And then we train them in what's going to be going on, what it's like. And then if there are any, no particular forms about consent other than their comfort level, that they see what we're going to be doing, what's going to be happening, they understand the schedule, and we stick to it right away. We stick to it clearly. And then we have family support groups that they may come to our family support group. And then we bring in people, medical people, neurologists to talk to the family from time to time. So we build a pretty close bond there. But the transparency of what we do on a daily basis is driven by the people themselves living with dementia and what they share with us, rather than some agenda on our part.
Yeah, and I would say for memory cafes, the different memory cafes have different approaches. Some of it might depend on where they are and what the policies are of the library, for example, or the nature center, or wherever they may be holding the memory cafe. At the ones that we operate through Fox Valley Memory Project, we just ask for consent for photographs. Because we like to demonstrate to the community what this joy is all about. But if somebody does not want their picture taken, we respect that. So that would be the primary form of consent for us in Northeast Wisconsin. But other places may have different approaches.
And Anne's just reminded us that we could accept that if people come, that is consent because they're free not to come. So that's great. I've got a quick question about working. Keely works with a population that has memory issues due to brain injury or trauma. Would that kind of experience be able to be incorporated into maybe a memory cafe, Susan?
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. Yes. Yeah. And so there are some people who have developed specialized memory cafes. I don't know of any for people with a traumatic brain injury or CTE. I don't know of any specialty cafes for that. There may be. But what I do know is that my colleague Beth Salzberg, who is in Massachusetts in the Boston area, she has been working with me and Ann Basting, some of you know Ann Basting, to develop this Memory Cafe Alliance. And they have memory cafes for people with Down syndrome, because we know that folks with Down syndrome, as they grow older, will start to demonstrate various kinds of symptoms of Alzheimer's and dementia. So they have specialized memory cafes for that. We have a memory cafe in our region for people who come through an organization that serves people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. But it's all under this rubric of they have aged into dementia, in addition to this other condition that they have lived with through their lives. So, but it all depends. Yeah.
Exactly. It just sounds very inclusive doing that too. So, and a last question, which might be for Lawson here. Wu asks, what are some major challenges now in the program, financially or structurally, or any other possible identified difficulties or challenges?
Okay, one of the things that I've noticed for over these years that we've been doing this, the single most important ingredient is helping a group identify the right director. That person is extremely important for a number of reasons. How they work with volunteers, how they work with those living with dementia, how they work with families, their comfort level about that, their energy, their enthusiasm, their passion for it. So I think we have a 98% success rate, but the one or two that have had some struggles is sometimes because of choosing someone as a director who was really not, maybe a nice person, but didn't really fit. So we have to know what the criteria are that we really need, and we have training for that. Once that is in place, then a number of other things that might be problems are solved by how that person interacts with people. In terms of financial challenges, we have found that people in the community are so grateful that something is there that the fundraising end of this it has so far we've not run into a lot of impediments with that at all, but rather a sense of generosity. But I think having the right director and then sometimes helping a church or synagogue or whatever be be alert to the fact that they may have to make some changes in their bathrooms or something else about the room. But that's part of the joy of actually getting us all upgraded anyway into what we need to be doing. So sometimes there are some structural kinds of things like that, but the key ingredient is that director. When that's in place, a lot of things work well.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to hand over to Jane, but I do want to say thank you very, very much again, Lawson and Susan and Daphne, for your time. And just before Jane closes today, Jane and I would really like to acknowledge our wonderful IT support provided by Margaret Gissing at Conrad Grebel. Margaret, thank you for all your amazing work behind the scenes for every single Encore series that we've run. Over to you, Jane.
Yes, thank you, Margaret, and thank you to all of you for coming today, and thank you especially to Susan and Lawson for freely offering your time and your wisdom and your enthusiasm with us. It's been wonderful. I'm just going to quickly share the graphic that's becoming familiar to all of us so you can see what's next. Jesse's going to join us in March talking about moral trauma and moral healing at the end of life. I have heard her present on this before. Very interesting research that she's doing, and she is involved working as a spiritual care provider in a long-term care home herself, and that's where her work comes out of. So you can look forward to that. Sign up, register at grable.ca/SA, and we will look forward to seeing you next month. So go well, everyone, and be blessed.